In Ireland, when it comes to EV sales for 2024, the first 2 months of the year, sales have kind of plateaued. And I'm just wondering, why is that? Are there less people interested in EVs, or are we seeing a bit of a resurgence in diesel cars, particularly where people are just not convinced they want to go electric yet? In steps the Peugeot 508 saloon, which has had a bit of a mild facelift since last year. Now the front is slightly different it's mainly headlight changes because the grille hasn't really changed, and there's 2 trim specs. If you go for the highest spec, which is the GT version, it's the version that does look the best. This colour is okay, but it just doesn't really show up some of the gorgeous lines of what is quite a striking looking saloon car. You can also get it in station wagon version, and that's another model type that I think is going to make a bit of a comeback over the next few years, where people just look at SUVs and say, is there something I could have with a much bigger boot that's a little bit sleeker in design? What we have in this version of the car then is a 131 brake horsepower, 1.5 8-speed diesel version of the 508. You can get it from €46,000. That's not for the GT version. But if you want a low slung saloon that does look pretty good and has a really huge boot that isn't electric in this version of the trim, I will say, it's quite a heavy boot, we're getting something that will give you an awful lot of space options when it comes to fitting things in to the back of this car. And the way it opens in a lift back style as well, you know, it gives you an awful lot of options for cramming stuff in to that aperture. It needs to be electric. Rear space doesn't end in the boot either, because there's plenty of it for at least 2 passengers in the back. You will fit 3. There's a bit of a hump. You've got different USB charging ports in the back. They're USB-A. There's 2 USB-Cs in the front, but some smaller passengers complained to me that they couldn't charge new devices in the back. But overall, a lot of space, a lot of leg room. Yeah, the design of the roof does impede a little bit on the head height, but you just about get away with it. Aside from the usual diesel clatter that is expected, particularly at idle and lower speeds, it's kind of refreshing to be in a car that is quite comfortable over bumps, imperfections in some of the poorer Irish roads that we have to endure. Even over speed ramps, it's quite acceptable. That thud that you get from heavier cars is just not there. This is a front wheel drive car, so when you floor it, you can expect perhaps a little bit of wheel slip in wetter conditions, but actually this car has 7,500 kilometers on it, and the tires are still doing a good job at behaving themselves. 8-speed automatic gearbox. You barely notice the change gear, to be honest with you. And it does what Peugeot claim it does when it comes to fuel economy. They say 5 litres per 100 kilometres. It's doing 5.5, but that's without trying. So I've no doubt you could, in fact, perhaps better it on longer journeys. And when you fire this thing up, you're going to get a range of anywhere between 800 and 1,000 kilometres from a single tank. Yes, not everybody or anybody does that kind of driving without stopping. It just wouldn't be safe, but it's still a good reference point by today's standards. The controversial steering wheel continues. This is obviously the last platform of iCockpit, because the newer versions, and I've had a look at the E3008 and indeed the E5008, they're at the end of this video if you want to check them out. That has got a different layout. It is nicer, but actually the piano keys that bring you to the shortcuts in this car, I kind of miss them in the newer version from Peugeot, so you could certainly buy it for that reason alone. This steering wheel anyways, as much as it causes issues for some people, me, it's fine, just depends how tall you are. It does give you a nice sporty feeling in the hand because it's quite a bit smaller than your average steering wheel and feels a bit nimble. The seats are comfortable. You don't get anything like massaging options and support for the back of your thighs on this version, but again, if you get the GT, that does give you everything. Should mention as well, if you're not committed to diesel, or you're just not sure where the future of diesel is, 2 things to mention. HVO is something that we're going to see more of around forecourts in Ireland, which is a much less emissions based diesel product, which is made from recycled vegetable oil. The other thing is you can get a 180 brake horsepower plug-in hybrid version of this car in petrol. There is just the standard 1.2 130 brake horsepower petrol engine if you want that as well. Just feel it can at times be a little bit gutless for the size of the car, particularly if you're carrying passengers and boot luggage and things like that. But for everyday use, a very comfortable car. A low seating position, worth pointing that out as well. If you're not a fan of kind of climbing down into cars, that perhaps could be a bit of a challenge. I think for most people under at least 60, it's not going to be an issue, but just worth pointing out. While the price isn't exactly astronomical for this car by today's standards, I should point out that although not a diesel one, you can get a Skoda Octavia, which will give you kind of the same space, to be honest with you, from €30,000, just a smidgen over 30. I can't quite believe that you can still get an Octavia for that price in Ireland. In fact, I should probably stop talking about it, because it'll make them think, oh yeah, we should probably whack the price of that up. But Skoda, if you're watching, please don't. Does it look as handsome as this car though? That's the question, and I don't think it does, particularly when you get a nice colour cell cars. It's always been a thing. In GT line, this thing will look very well, and it's one of those cars that you can just settle into, get comfortable, and do the long journey that you need to do in your 1.5 HDI 508. There's a lot of talk about depreciation when it comes to EVs. Depreciation is not a new phenomenon, it's on all cars. And by that measure, I can tell you where this car is going to be in 3 years' time. When it comes to that, there could possibly be a new model of the 508 on the market by then as well. But if it is a company car allowance that you have, that's probably the safest spot to be considering this car, because it's quite comfortable to drive, it looks great, and it has all the interior space that you need from what is not a crazy price car. I'm not comparing it with Mercedes and Audi and BMW, of course, but those brands are now doing this size of car for significantly less money. Indeed, the electric ID.7, which is, in many ways the same design and size of car, is also a good €12,000 extra. So let me know what you think of this new version of the kind of old 508 at this stage. Would you consider one? Do you think it's pretty good looking, as much as I do? And would you put it on your shopping list if you were in the market for a saloon or indeed an estate? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.